Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next installment of the Academy Software Foundation's Careers in Film and Technology webinar series. Now, I'm Rachel Rose. I co-chair the Academy Software Foundation's Diversity and Inclusion Working Group. I'm really excited about today's episode, where we will get an inside look at visual effects careers that live at that intersection between art and technology. Now, in case this is the first webinar that you're joining us for, or if you have been to others but want to remember what we've done so far or where we're going, let's just talk a little bit about this series. Originally, tonight's webinar was actually going to be the last of the entire series, but we extended the original series of 6 with 2 bonus sessions on resumes last week, and then the open source software Blender next week. Now, I would definitely consider joining us again next week to get an in-depth look at Blender from a pro. I'm very excited about that session as well. It should be really fantastic. And if one of the webinars that have already passed interests you, please know that all of the sessions are recorded and available for later viewing. Now, today we will get to hear from 3 professionals, Catherine Chablon and Eileen, who work in the industry and can provide some firsthand knowledge and experience on visual effects careers that combine art and technology. There will be a Q&A after the presentations. So if you think of any questions at all while the presentations are happening, please just drop the question into the Q&A panel that is accessed at the bottom of your screen. I'll be using these questions during the Q&A so that we can ask our panelists fantastic things that, that you want to know more about. So without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker, Catherine. Go ahead and join me on the screen. So Catherine is a supervising technical director at DreamWorks Animation and has been with the company for 11 years. She has worked on many projects. Let me stop sharing my screen so she can actually share. She has worked on many projects, including Madagascar 3, Puss in Boots, The Croods, and Trolls World Tour, and is currently working on The Bad Guys. She graduated from UC Berkeley in 2010 with a degree in computer science and has always had a passion for both the engineering and art aspects of computer animation. She helped teach the student-run computer animation course in college, which had both art and engineering majors. In her spare time, she loves being active, especially thanks to her toddler, and is also an avid gamer. Welcome, Catherine.
Hi. So thanks for the nice introduction. I'm Catherine, and I'll just kind of talk a little bit about myself. Oh, there we go. So I was actually born in Tokyo, Japan. I'm half Japanese and half German, but I was otherwise raised in Southern California. We moved here around 3rd grade. I always kind of had a passion for art and computing, and so I self-taught myself graphic design and web design back, in the 90s when there was almost none of this available. But I was always just really passionate about it. If you guys know LiveJournal, I had tons of LiveJournal posts on graphic design, so really nerdy. And as she mentioned, I graduated from UC Berkeley in 2010 with a Bachelor of Arts in Computer Science. I actually started as a pre-med. I thought I was going to be a pediatrician, and as soon as I got to school, I realized I did not want to go to pre-med. I didn't want to go to school for another 10 years. I didn't know anything about computer science. I basically took an introduction course my junior year, and that kind of hooked me, and I basically just switched majors at that point. I didn't even know that you could do computer animation with a computer science degree until I found out about that student taught class that Rachel mentioned, which is called UC Bug. And I basically just fell in love. I've always loved computer animation. I grew up watching Pixar movies and just loved them. And I didn't even know it was a career that I could go into. And so I basically focused on computer graphics while in college. And while I was in college, I did a few different internships. I did some actually marketing and graphic design internships, just because that was something I was really familiar with. And then my last semester of school, I got an internship at DreamWorks Animation up at the Redwood City campus, which no longer exists. But I did an R&D internship where I helped develop some Maya tests for, or QA testing for Maya. And that was in spring 2010, which was my last semester in school. And while I was there, I happened to meet someone I knew from college. He was 4 years older than me, but I knew him from, I was in the marching band. And I just happened to run into him on campus. And he basically told me about the TD role, which is what I'm doing now, which when he explained to me, that sounded exactly like what I wanted to do. I knew that I wasn't particularly interested in working in just development and coding all day. I really loved the like art side of it. I really wanted to be a really active person in that. And so when he told me about the technical director role, that sounded perfect for me. So I applied to it and I started in June 2010 as a lighting technical director. My first film was Megamind, which I was on it for the last 3 months, which was really, really intense. I was doing overtime basically right out of the gate, but I didn't know what I was doing. So it was kind of an interesting experience, but I have a special spot in my heart for that film. So here's a list of films that I did complete. So Megamind, Puss in Boots, Madagascar 3, Penguins of Madagascar, the first Croods, the first Trolls. As you'll see, my life is filled with trolls. So I was a lighting TD for all of those, and then I became a lead TD, and I did the Trolls Holiday Special, and then I got promoted to supervising TD. So for that, I just completed Trolls World Tour last year, and I'm currently on The Bad Guys, which comes out in next spring. So a lot of my job is figuring out all the pieces between the pipeline. The TD role, like the point of this presentation is we're in between the artistic and then also the technical side. While most of our work is to be technical and developers, we are very much the frontline defense for the artists themselves. So just to explain, I'm sure you guys already know this, but this is like the ideal pipeline. Everything just goes in a straight line and it just goes all the way through. But really the reality is this is kind of what the pipeline actually looks like. There's a lot of back and forth. There's more lines than this even. This is probably an even simplified version of that. But as you can see, it gets really complicated. And so basically the TDs fit into every single one of these departments, and we help make sure that all the lines and all the data is actually getting through correctly between all these departments. And so it's a really challenging job. A really big part of what we do is problem solving, because our pipeline is so complex. We have to be able to come up with solutions even if we don't necessarily know the answer. So it's a lot of talking to other people, interacting with artists, interacting with R&D. So you get a really great range of just experience doing this role. Just some fun statistics, since I love statistics. Trolls World Tour was 90 minutes long, so it was 130,000 frames, assuming 24 frames per second. We had 4,000 assets, unique assets on the show. We had about 500 people in the crew. We used about 1.2 petabytes of data, and Crowds alone was 400 terabytes. And then it took 151 million render hours, assuming we did it, straight serially, which we obviously don't, but it was a very challenging show. If you haven't seen it, everything is covered in fur. So it's a really, really challenging thing to render and very expensive to render. And that was a lot of our challenges. And so the current technology, we use a lot of third-party applications, but we also have, and then we also use USD, which is an open source scene definition language, which was created by Pixar, and DreamWorks has really embraced, and we have it pretty much throughout the pipeline at this point. And then we also have our own internal tools, such as Primo, which is our animation tool, which is amazing. You can animate in real time, and it's just insane. I mean, it uses a lot of memory, but the animators love it. It's such a wonderful tool. And then Moonray is our renderer, so it's our own proprietary ray tracer, or MCRT. And then everything's files on disk at the moment. But in the future, we hope to be more in the cloud and all that stuff, since I know that's a big thing, a hot topic in pretty much every studio at this point. And like I said, a lot of what we do is is just challenging work. And so sometimes this is like the perfect metaphor for kind of what it's like sometimes to be a TD. It's how the user explained it, how the project lead understood it, how it was designed, how the programmer wrote it, and then what the user really wanted. So a lot of it is taking time to talk to people and figure out what, sometimes we'll be given solutions by the artists, but then when you actually talk to them, that's not actually what they want. They actually need something different. So it's a lot of just problem solving. And so we live in the pipeline somewhere in between the artists and the R&D. And in general, TDs are assigned to an artistic department. So at DreamWorks in particular, it's different at every studio. I think some studios have a global pool of TDs per show, and they will help every single department. But at DreamWorks, we have a TD per department. So like surfacing will have a surfacing TD, lighting has a lighting TD, animation has an animation TD, and it's per show. And so they get to focus and help the artists on that show, which is challenging as well, because depending on the department, there's sometimes like animation has like 50 animators in one TD. So sometimes that can get really challenging, but it's very fun. And so just as a small breakdown, we have show TDs, which are the people on the show. And then we have something called production technology TDs. And those guys are much more, they're the people developing our feature pipeline. So they're a little bit more removed, and they're not helping artists as part of their day-to-day, but they are still doing TDs type work. And like I mentioned, TDs know everything. We work with all of these different groups of people and more. So it's really great. You get a really great insight into both the artistic side and the R&D and developer and system side. And so what we look for when we're hiring is we look for CS and CG background, interest, experience. We definitely are still very technical. We definitely prefer people with CS degrees, but we also have lots of TDs that are self-taught in CS and just are really passionate about it, and they learn it on their own. So we do need strong programming skills, object-oriented programming skills, experience in Python and or C++. Really, if you know any language, we mostly use Python, but we don't hold it against someone if they don't know Python. It's pretty easy to pick up. And then lastly, experience in 3D party tools, or third-party tools and applications. So Maya, Houdini, all those, Blender, any experience in that is a big plus, since our day-to-day is very much in those tools. And we also look for people that are half geeky, half artistic. A lot of our TDs are actually really artistic people, or just have really interesting interests. Like I know someone who's like a huge volleyball fan, so they play a ton of volleyball. And then we have people that are like straight up artists, like they're just as good as some of our artists. And then unfazed by the unexpected. So our job is a lot of pressure sometimes. So just being able to switch what you're looking at, and just like on a dime, just being able to switch context is really important. Thriving under minimal supervision. We really like people that are really proactive and can just aren't afraid to go ask questions. That's such a big, important part of our job. Explaining things well, we say explain it like I'm 5. Like we expect TDs to be able to explain really technical things to artists that may not be technical at all. Or just figure out, the level of detail that needs to go. Just it's a lot of reading the room, and then being comfortable being wrong. I joke all the time that I still have lots of questions, or I don't joke, but I still always have lots of questions all the time. I don't know the answer to everything, even after 11 years. And that's totally fine. It's just part of the job and part of what's fun about the job too. And so, yeah, the good TD questions everything, gets satisfaction from solving a mystery, is calm and methodical, can prioritize requests, and can multitask under pressure. And so that's it for my presentation. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Catherine. Just a reminder, if you look at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A box. Please feel free to click that box and enter in any of the questions that you have, and we will get all of our panelists back up on the screen at the end of this presentation for a Q&A and go through your questions. Really excited to answer those. But next, I would like to welcome Shabnam to the screen. Shabnam started her career as an animator and worked on a number of children's television series before moving on to Pipeline technical direction. She's worked on several exciting animated features such as Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and Over the Moon, and is currently the lead Pipeline technical director on the sequel to Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse at Sony Pictures Imageworks. Shabnam is also a cognitive science student at University of Toronto, where she continues to study human cognition as well as mathematics and computer science. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for the introduction. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the VFX Careers Art and Tech. I'm pleased to present to you the following points today. I'm going to introduce myself a little bit, go through this art and tech subject from a perspective of my personal life, career, and also a specific example from a project. I'm going to introduce this aha moment, talk a little bit about that, and then conclude the presentation. And to start, I just want to bring your attention to the art and tech balance. To me, that's what it feels like. It feels like I've generally been balancing art and tech my entire life from every aspect. And that's the theme that I'm gonna have throughout everything, and also this presentation too. So just to introduce myself, my name is Shabnam. I'm a senior pipeline technical director at Sony Pictures Imageworks. I'm currently the lead TD on the sequel to Spider-Verse. And I started as a character animator in this industry. So I basically had about 7-8 years of character animation before I switched to pipeline. And that had a lot to do with becoming a student again. And that's why I'm also a student. I kind of identify as a student, and I think I will be for a really long time. I love learning, and I think I keep going back to school because of that. And this is sort of a painting that I did when I was a teenager a long time ago, and I sort of included that. But I have, sorry about that, I have more of that coming in the next slide. So this is the art and tech life perspective. Basically, since I was young, I had this situation where I was very interested in the artistic aspects of things. I like to paint and explore different mediums, acrylic, watercolor, what does it look like with pencil, and all of that. But also the other aspect of my school that was completely different was the fact that I was interested in math. I loved geometry. I played chess. I was also interested in learning languages. I played basketball. I played in a team. I did theater. So I was really interested in many different things. And I think Catherine really worded it well when she said half geeky, half artistic. I think I definitely relate to that in terms of what my soul feels like to me. And so when I immigrated to, I was born and raised in Tehran, Iran, and I immigrated to Canada about 13 years ago. And I was an architecture student when I moved to Canada. And because of immigration, I was waiting to see, well, I'm gonna, apply to some universities, continue architecture and see what happens. And in that waiting time, I found a 3D animation program in Toronto at the Seneca Art and Technology College. And I thought, okay, well, this is going to help me with the architecture. Everybody knows AutoCAD, but being able to 3D model for architecture is great. So maybe I'll try that and see if that will help me with my studies in the future. So I got into the 3D animation program without actually knowing that related to the film industry. And I stepped in and I learned how to animate, and I got stuck and I never got out of there. That was what I wanted to do at that time. And I thought I want to be an animator, and I switched right there and then. 8 months in that program, and I started animating. And that's how I got to Franny's Feet, which was the first project that I worked on. So over the years, I worked on several different projects. I mostly animated on TV. I had a couple of features as well. And I worked on projects for many different audiences, like very, very young age, but also older. And I really enjoyed all of them equally. I'm really passionate about the content that we present in our industry to children, the impact that it has to everybody. I reflect a lot on how I was impacted by that. So it really is important to me, regardless of the project, it really is important to me how it's taken by children of all ages. And so I really enjoyed all of these. And basically, throughout the animation career, I also, as animators normally observe quite a bit of human behavior and what drives their motion, basically, sort of like what actors would do. We just produce that on screen as opposed to acting that out ourselves. We normally do that for reference, but we end up mostly replicating that motion in a 3D software or on a drawing. So exploring more of that, I got interested in that side of things. And I thought, well, I want to learn more about cognition as well as I'm doing that. So this is about 5 years ago. I started at the University of Toronto as a cognitive student. I started talking to my workplaces and asking them if I could have one day off so that I can work 4 days a week and study that one day and be able to basically continue studying as I'm working. And I'm still doing that. It's going to be a long undergrad, and I'm thinking that probably once that's finished, there's going to be another longer one. I'm not sure what, but likely it's not, we're not there yet. And around that time, I was actually introduced to open source as well, because I was animating on a Blender project just before NextGen, and that was fully produced in Blender. And I was amazed by it. As an animator, I thought, well, you know, the part that I understood about it was that Blender is a free software, and that's amazing. Wow, how much money is saved in production, and what does that mean? How does that work? But I didn't really have an idea of anything else until I started learning programming. In cognitive science, generally, there's a couple of courses, usually basic Python courses. And normally, if you're interested, if you want to double major with computer science and get into artificial intelligence, for example, you would generally continue on computer science, but you would have to take a couple of courses to be familiar with that. So that's what I did. And then I realized, well, I really missed the math side, the geeky side of my life. And I kind of want to continue on that too. So I started taking computer science courses. I had to take math courses now for that. And I'm still doing that as well, together with cognitive science courses, which I don't want to drop either. But that also helped me with this transition. So I basically transitioned from NextGen, I transitioned to a pipeline TD. I started to think about the problems a little bit more in terms of the tech as opposed to the art. And sometimes the switch back and forth became quite entertaining, and I really enjoyed that. And I thought, well, maybe I should look at this as a path. And so that's how I got into it. And my next gig was Spider-Verse at ImageWorks, and that was a phenomenal experience for me. I was a lead TD on Over the Moon and another project I worked on, and now onto the sequel to the Spider-Verse. So that's the career part. And I guess the specific project, of course, for me, overall, from all the projects that I worked on, I think Spider-Verse for me was the best mixture of art and tech. The communication between the two, the feedback loop, the amazing feedback loop that actually let everything get better and improve, and that was really interesting to see. And so I wanted to introduce the couple of sides of it, basically from pipeline or technical direction aspect. There's another terminology that's used generally. Front end and back end is something you might have heard in these talks as well. And that sort of, for the front end side, that sort of basically refers to modeling, well, story also, but those are kind of pre-front end even. But you have modeling, you have, you know, generally asset departments like rigging, and then you have animation. And then when character effects and effects come in, they're sort of like halfway. They're not exactly front end or back end. But most of the time, front end TDs, for example, would be dealing with character effects as well. Sometimes back end TDs would be dealing with FX. So it really differs from studio to studio, as Catherine mentioned as well. And I just want you to think about the fact that, for example, for a modeler, there's an aspect to modeling that is completely the procedural part of what they do. They don't think about the lines and points, the vertices and edges that exist on the geometry. They think about the pressure that they put on their tablet, or when they're sculpting on their clay. It's about that feeling. It's about that experience when they create their art. When a TD or a technical person, an engineer, might be thinking about modeling, they might be thinking about all of that, but also in terms of vertices and edges and angles and understanding topology and how these, deform. And same thing goes with every other department, pretty much. There's like two worlds of, thinking back and forth between these. And an example of Spider-Verse was Inklines, for example. Inklines were one of the projects on Spider-Verse that were basically really involved for all departments. And for asset departments, it was a part of their creation. For animators, it was a part of their performance. They would add more inclines as they saw necessary for the performance. And then for engineering, there was a side to it where they would use machine learning, understand those choices for artists, and then decide to see, well, can we replicate this and have it correct itself as it goes. So that was something that really brought everything together. And of course, without that feedback loop between this art and tech community where people can communicate, this would not be possible. And TDs have a big role in that, because they can kind of interpret those two worlds at the same time. And the backend part is mostly basically about the image, the final image. And in lighting and comp, most of the time, an artist might be thinking about composition, contrast, staging their character. How do I add this effect to make this more important? But for someone who's on the technical side, they might be thinking about what kind of shader can I use to create this sort of effect, or how does the light get traced for us to be able to create this kind of final image. And that's another example I could bring to you from this project, where we were trying to stylize basically the final renders, and that was simplification. And for simplification, the same thing happens when you're, as an artist, you might think on a painting that, oh, maybe I'll reduce my color palettes, maybe I'll reduce my number of brushes, maybe I choose very specific brushes. And knowing that, a software developer might go in and start to work on that, and a shader engineer might go in and start to work on that on that basis, and a TD could help basically connect those two together and bring them closer together in a sense. So lastly, the aha moment, basically what I wanted to bring up with this, and this is a snippet from a scientific article that I learned about in my cognitive science course, and I wanted to share that with you. And that was this idea that anytime basically that a problem that is not normally easily solved is solved, like a creative problem, they noticed that neurons on both sides of the brain fire at once. So it's a larger network, and they all they get to this point basically that suddenly, just a few milliseconds before you come up with that solution, they all find this connection and they all fire at the same time. And this was very interesting to me, because I thought this is the industry that I think provides a lot of opportunity for these aha moments, where you would look at an artist and how an artist would approach a situation, and you would think, well, it's completely different from how a mathematician, for example, would go into Fourier series to create this kind of drawing. But at the end of the day, they're thinking about the same result. It's just in different ways. And being able to be in that world of connecting both is an absolute pleasure. It's really interesting and really inspiring, and it's never ending. And so I wanted to leave you with that. And that's it for me. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to more.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shabnam. That was super, super interesting. I really like the conversation about kind of the right and left sides of the brain working together. I feel like that describes our industry so well. So next, I'd like to welcome Eileen to the stage. So Eileen is a graduate from the University of California, Irvine, where she received her degrees in psychology and criminology. She has been at DreamWorks Animation for about 2 years, where she supports the early career programs and diversity outreach. She loves that she gets to play a part in opening doors and creating opportunities for folks who are trying to enter into the entertainment industry. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm just going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. I'm not a TD, you know, I'm not in technology, but a little bit about me. So I have been at DreamWorks for almost 2 years. And prior to this, I thought I wanted to go into a different career path. I thought I wanted to be a psychologist or be in counseling or something. I did an internship and I realized that's not what I wanted to do. However, I did want to help people in a different capacity. And while I was at UCI, I was actually already in customer service, and I was doing recruiting just in a different way. So when this position opened up for recruiting coordinator, I knew when I read the job description, I knew that I could do it. It was just more of like, how do I show them that I'm the perfect fit? So anytime I'm talking to early career talent, I always tell them to please tailor your resume and your cover letter. I did that about like 5 times, and it definitely paid off. So that is how I got here. And I'm representing just more the internship program that we have going on. So there's just like a few slides about that. So our internship program, it actually runs 3 times a year during the spring, summer, and fall. During the spring and fall, they are part-time, and then during the fall, the summer, it is full-time. So right now we are actually finishing up hiring our interns for the summer. And then our internship program is open to enrolled students and also to students who are recent graduates. So if you just graduated, you can apply within 6 months of graduation. All of our internships are paid, and they are about 10 to 12 weeks long. In person, they were 12 weeks long, and now that we are virtual, they are about 10 weeks. And in the summer, we will continue virtual internships. I'm not sure about the fall, but it's been great because we've been able to have so many different interns from different states that it was not possible before. And then something cool about our internship program is that not only are you learning within your own team, you also get to attend all these great events that are put on by our training team and our employee engagement team. So our employee engagement team, they pretty much bring like the fun to the party. So, you know, if you're in front of a screen all day, we were in person, they would put like holiday parties on or release parties. And even now that we are virtual, they just put on so many things to kind of remind ourselves that it's okay to have fun. At the end of the day, we are making cartoons, so it's okay to have fun. And then we also have a resume building workshops, and you get to meet the lovely recruiters and ask them anything. Yeah, so going into the next slide, I just want to show you a few pictures of just our intern community. So we do a lot of different events as well as volunteering events. So on the top left, we volunteer with the LA Food Bank. We also bring artists to come and talk to the interns. So if you are not artistic like me, I can't draw, but I still like to join and learn new techniques. You also get a chance to meet other interns that fall within the NBCU umbrella. So since NBCU acquired DreamWorks, we have a lot of access to their IPs and their groups and their teams. So one summer, our interns got to meet with NBCU interns and Illumination interns. And then as far as for our internships, so we have internships within the TD team, which Catherine covered. So for those are mostly offered during our part-time season, so during the fall or the spring. And in that one, you'll pretty much be supporting the team, you'll be attending meetings. And then also at the beginning of the internship, we ask you to set learning goals with your manager. So if there's like a certain thing you want to learn, you could just have a conversation with them, and then at the end you can give a presentation of what you learned. And then we also have our internships in R&D, so in research and development. These are mostly only offered during the summer, and the teams that offer interns or are looking for interns vary. So sometimes there can be an internship in rendering and shading, or web development, configuration and management, the FX team. It really just depends. But a piece of advice that I want to give you all, if you are looking to apply into our internship program, is definitely pay attention to the job description and what skills they're looking for, and really try to tailor your resume to that. And if it's like, for example, for the R&D, we actually ask for cover letter. So if you know what area you are interested in, make sure to put that in your cover letter, just so we can match it with the team. And yeah, that's all I have for the internship program. Of course, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. But follow us on social media. Actually, we do a Career Tip Tuesday. So on Instagram, different recruiters go in and answer questions that people have. So if you go in there, there might be questions that you have that have already been answered. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eileen. So yeah, definitely, put some more questions in there if you have some questions about the internship program. And again, we can answer that during the Q&A. Now, before we jump to the Q&A, I am going to do just a couple of announcements. So let me share my screen again. Great. So first, if you haven't already been involved in some other way with the Academy Software Foundation, I just want to mention that the Academy Software Foundation is an open source organization, and that means that they are open to participation from everyone who wants to get involved. So if you are interested, consider joining one of the mailing lists for the group. And we also really recommend that you join our new ASWF Slack students channel. There you can virtually mingle with others interested in the industry and talk with industry professionals who are part of the organization. And then finally, I'm actually very pleased to announce that the ASWF will be offering a new program of learning, community, and mentorship for people who are underrepresented in our industry. So the ASWF Diversity and Inclusion Summer Learning Program will kick off by focusing on women and non-binary individuals. Participants in the program will have the opportunity to learn about our industry through self-guided online lessons, and will be assigned a mentor from the ASWF to help them through their journey. Now, spaces will be limited, but no experience is required to apply. We are really interested in finding people who are super passionate about learning and motivated to give it their best. Applications will go live soon and will be advertised on the students' Slack channel, among other places. So if you identify as a woman or non-binary individual, please take a look at the students' channel for more details very soon. And with that, let me invite Catherine, Shabnam, and Eileen to the stage for our Q&A. Awesome. There are a lot of really great questions, so I'm super excited about getting this started. Awesome. So by far, a lot of the questions that have been really upvoted are around how to get into the industry and how to show your best. So in particular, what kind of projects could a current CS student looking for a TD role have on their resume?
So I know, in DreamWorks, like I mentioned, we look for people with CS backgrounds. Like I said, it's not a requirement, but obviously any programming projects you've done is great, especially if they're focused around computer graphics. Like a lot of our TDs, at least if they were a CS major in school, they probably wrote a ray tracer, they've probably written shaders. So they've done the really in-depth CS graphics stuff. But we've also seen people who, learn Maya and then they make a plugin in Maya. So things within the tools is also really great. Because honestly, most of our day-to-day is plug-in type work. We're not writing Maya. Like that's not what the TDs do. That's what R&D does. TDs are the ones that write the plugins. We write the integration between, let's say, like, you know, we need to hand something off from Maya into like Nuke or Houdini or something, right? Like we need some way to automate that. That's what the TD does. They figure out, okay, let's take the data out of Maya, convert it so that Houdini or Primo or somebody can read it. So that's a lot of our job. And that kind of is a follow-up to, I think I saw a USD question in there, and that's really where we use USD. We use USD as our like truth kind of, so everything gets converted into USD. Most applications at this point can read USD, or if they can't, then we have another conversion out from USD into whatever the other languages that they use within the program. So that's a lot of what we do. So things like that too, even just like, oh, I figured out how to integrate, you know, automate how to, you know, render this thing out and then open it up in Nuke and do this automated script that just comps it together, something like that. That's something also TDs do. So we also do a lot of GUI stuff. So if you know PyQt, that type of thing, or Qt, whatever, just any kind of GUI scripting. I didn't know Qt until I got into the industry. I had done some like iPhone programming, so I learned it there. But you know, just the concepts are all similar. So we do a lot of GUI, but we actually do a lot of command line scripting as well. Actually, our artists very much are able to at least run command line tools for the most part. Not all of them, but a lot of some of their day-to-day is running tools in the Linux command line. So we'll write those type of scripts as well.
I also want to jump in and say that if you are interested in our internship program, don't get discouraged if you don't have work experience. Project experience, student experience is totally fine. It's just more about like you showing what's on your resume that matches the job description. So if they're looking for specific skills, like what did you do in your group project? And when it's a group project, we understand there's other people working with you, but we want to know what did you specifically do. I just want to do that quick plug-in.
Yeah, we personally love new college grads as TDs. Like that was my first job out of school. I was a new college grad. It was my first job. Obviously I've been there now for 11 years, but we find we love new college grads. Like they're just so excited and are really interested in learning, and the TD role is just such a good kind of foot in the door. And we have people that they know eventually they want to be artists, or they know eventually they want to be R&D engineers, but like the TD role is like a really great way for them to just get in there, kind of figure out what they want to do exactly and get all that exposure and like networking. And so definitely we very much love seeing student projects. Like that's something we very much look at when we are interviewing.
Yeah, to add to this great conversation, we also had a lot of questions about how to show your work the best. What kind of details do you like to see in a resume is a real helpful, especially for these TD positions. Are there other sorts of specifics that folks might be able to show that would really show off their passion? Shabnam, I don't know if you had anything to add to that.
Yeah, that's absolutely it. I think having that interest, of course, like you wouldn't have industry experience right away if you've just finished school, but having that kind of interest and being able to communicate at least that what is your view, what is your vision of a specific maybe problem or even a specific goal in a department, and being able to verbalize that in your technical terms is extremely advanced. It's something that it might look simple, but a lot of times basically on either side, this disconnect happens at all times where artists are not able to communicate their issues in technical terms, and technical people are not able to communicate their solutions in artistic terms. So if you can demonstrate that you have that ability to bridge that gap, that should be a really good point for introduction.
Absolutely. I think that that's such an important thing, just being able to like communicate with different types of people and kind of do that translation. We also have a really great question about what TD interviews look like. Are there normal coding questions in those meetings? Do you end up, those interviews, do you end up answering a lot of data structures and object-oriented programming questions, or is it more behavioral? What does it really look like?
It's all of the above, but we don't do like the Google like 6-hour crazy interview. It's like an hour and a half. It's not too long, but we have sections where we are like, especially in the T group, like I mentioned, we very much have to interact with people and we have to be able to be comfortable to speak with people. And we know that CS, not always everyone is super comfortable with talking. So, we've had people that were like technically amazing, but just were not really good at explaining, or kind of were on the more timid side. And that's, we know there's a difference between nerves, we can usually tell when it's nerves versus just personality, which we totally understand. But I would say we weight behavior, personality, and the CS part evenly. Like we actually very much want strong contenders on both of those.
Well, in my case, I could say that I didn't have a coding test at the interview. That's for sure. It was clear from my resume that I was comfortable with Python, and I knew some C, and I had some Java in school. So it was something that, I had enough comfort with languages. But then what was more asked of me as someone who had one TD experience before that was, what are some of the things that you've worked on or thought about even as an animator in my first job? So my transition from an art job to a tech job was really talking about the pain points that I figured out. Sometimes that's not applicable to you coming out of school or not having that art background in the industry as well. So it's really specific, but generally, as far as I know, for engineering, we do have coding skills test as well, from what I understand. But for TDs, I don't think so. At least that's my understanding.
Yeah, we don't have like a, like here, write a piece of code. It's very like what we would think a TD would be doing on their day-to-day. Like we obviously want to make sure people understand graphics and understand the basics of graphics as well. So our questions really actually are more graphics focused than just like CS. We're not going to make you recite an algorithm or anything like that, but we just want to see how you solve the problem as well. Like that's really more important for us than the actual programming part of it.
Awesome. So this was actually partially answered in another question in the Q&A box under the answered category, but we have had a number of people that have been interested in better understanding the great differences between TDs at different companies and within different departments. So I wondered if anyone could speak to their experience in this. And maybe Eileen, you definitely are hiring people. How do you see this come up in the hiring process?
Yeah, so for me, because I work in the early careers team, I don't really, it's different when we're looking at resumes in the early career space. But I can pass it along to Catherine or Shabnam. Maybe they can speak more to it.
Yeah, I guess for ImageWorks pipeline TD, we don't actually have department TDs in that sense. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. It's not a necessity per project. However, pipeline TDs are generally more focused with front-end pipeline, and the back-end pipeline, we normally have lighting TDs or back-end TDs that connect to that side. And what happens a lot of times is that I see there's a lot of back and forth between R&D and engineering and pipeline TDs, especially if they're comfortable with writing plugins or software. Then it's very natural for that to happen. The other side of that is the case too, where there are some TDs who are actually interested in pursuing learning in, say, lighting, for example, or animation. Then there's definitely situations where we have training for those as well, and you could certainly try that. there's other people, I'm sure from the speakers, we've had examples too, but there are a lot of TDs, for example, that might end up in, for example, a CG supervision or a VFX supervision route that way. And they come from a technical background, but they eventually learn the art side, what's specifically needed, and the leadership side, and that's how that transition happens. So both, it's very common and possible to switch between the two. Basically, it's not a very strict, career for life kind of thing that once you get into it, then there's no moving around. There's a lot of growth in every aspect.
Yeah, and just to add to that, because I think I saw a question about that, and I did answer it, but it's unfortunate because the title technical director means like 1,000 different things. Like at Sony, a technical director is actually an artist. Like they don't do any programming at all. They're just artists and they just do shot work and that's all they do. I know at like Pixar, they have a distinction, but they call their artist TD, but then they also have pipeline TD, which is like my kind of TD. So when you are looking at job descriptions, that's the hint is probably the CS degree or programming skills. Like that's usually the big hint that it's probably more of like the technical TD versus shot, like, and especially if they ask you for a demo reel, it's probably like an artistic technical director, because I don't think pipeline TDs or like the DreamWorks TDs, we don't ask for demo reels because we don't expect people to have artistic skill. Obviously, naturally, I think a lot of us do, just because the way we learn. Like I think the easiest way to learn is to do the artistic work, and that's how you get your experience in 3D packages, right? So but we certainly don't expect it, but people do send them to us sometimes too, just because it's fun to see what people have done.
Actually, for ImageWorks, from my understanding, like the history of it actually sounds about right, because what I understand is that way prior to when I joined the team, it was sort of like that, where there was more shot work in the TD department, and there would be all sorts of different things. They even had different names for the department, and then it changed to more of a situation where it's like a hybrid now. We have software engineers in Pipeline TD team, and we also have artist background, and so it's a combination actually, and there's you could be programming just with respect to pipeline, which would be the products that are getting back and forth and being passed. You could be a wrangler, you could be just dealing with images, or you could be in shot and helping artists at the same time. I think all of those are possible these days, and depending on where you're comfortable, of course, you have the choice of like leaning towards that, but yeah, super fluid.
Excellent. So there was a good question, I think specifically pointed towards Shabnam about balancing. So in particular, how do you balance your job with classes and course homework? But you can also think of that question as being more general about just balance.
Sure. I think the life and work balance is sort of the same thing. I kind of have to replace the life part with studying, but that's the truth of it. But discipline, I just have to really make sure I switch my mind off when I'm working on an assignment and I'm not thinking about work. And when I'm at work, I switch off the study, and that's it. That time is over. So I really have to be careful with my time management, make sure that I have enough space and enough time for my assignments, but also make sure that that never gets involved in my work time, because it can easily build up from there and get very stressful. So I would say separating those two from each other, kind of like life and work balance, is like the way to go.
It's always tricky. So we had a couple of technical questions that I think I'll try throwing out there and seeing what our opinions are. So how much does the industry depend on machine or deep learning?
I feel like it's kind of a newish thing in the industry. It's kind of a hot topic. I feel like next year's SIGGRAPH is probably going to be a lot of that. I feel like that's kind of the buzz word at this point. I think I know like Disney did something really cool with their like denoiser, where they did a machine learning denoiser, and apparently it works like for live action, their live action like Avengers films. It also works on like Moana, and so I know that's kind of the route they're going. And so I think a lot of studios are kind of looking at similar things. And I think also even just for just like data processing, because there's so much data, you know, that goes into every single production. And obviously some of the stuff is redundant and repetitive, and maybe there's stuff that we can leverage, you know, maybe like procedurally generating things, you know, things like that, that machine learning can probably get us there. But I feel like it's pretty early still. But I think in the next few years, we're going to start to see some really cool stuff come out of that, is my feeling.
Yeah, I second that. I think it's become the fad of the day, and maybe rightfully so. It does get some interesting results in some cases. So like the incline example, for example, for Spider-Verse is one I could present to you that certainly had that, but there are other projects that I know of also that use machine learning. So it's certainly something that's being explored for sure. And since it's a new thing, it's all about being able to think about a problem and think how your knowledge in machine learning, for example, could solve that problem. And you could present that as something new. And that's very exciting too, if it's something that's not that explored in the industry or not as much, and you can come up with an idea. That's great. That's a good space to be in.
Awesome. And I know you guys are more on the technical TD side, but there have been several questions specifically around what a portfolio should look like, or if you have any advice for folks who might be trying to get into a more artistic role. In particular, the mention of rigging and animation TD was one of the topics that came up. Yeah, so I don't know if you guys have any advice in that area.
Well, in terms of portfolio, depending on which, well, I mean, for TD, I don't know if portfolio is something that needs to be necessarily a part of your application, not that I know of. It certainly is interesting to demonstrate that or communicate that to your recruiters that, you know, I have an art background or I have that kind of experience, but I don't think it's something specifically that anybody would ask for. For an animation tools TD, sometimes I've seen several good examples actually are out there online where people have come up with a package of tools for animation, and they show how those can be used in workflows as an animator. So that's very interesting. It doesn't have to be necessarily something that you'd submit in your application, but it certainly is something that would enhance your application if it's there and you've done something like that. That's all I've seen so far.
Awesome.
And then just a tip from a recruiting perspective is like, I see more like portfolios on the artistic side where it's more about storyboarding and visual development, all that stuff. But I think the same tips for portfolios apply, where really keep it very clear and organized on what you are targeting, because sometimes we come across a lot of portfolios where we're like, we don't know exactly what they're looking for. Like, and if you do have a lot of different skills, like maybe create different tabs for it where it makes it clear for us. Just because I've been in conversations with other recruiters and they're like, they're awesome, but we don't know what they're looking for, and it makes us harder to place you. So just a quick tip. And also always include your contact information. It makes it so much easier for the recruiters. Just picture, we're looking at so many different applications, and if it's taking us so long just to contact you, then we might just move on to the next person. So just make sure to include all that stuff.
Awesome. So there's still a few other questions in the Q&A, but I think we're running out of time. So I was just going to open it up with one last question of whether there is any parting advice that maybe you received from someone else that really helped you in your career. I know there's something.
I would say, I don't know if it's advice, but definitely luck does factor into it a little bit. Like I was, like I mentioned, I just happened to run into somebody that I knew. I didn't even know they worked at DreamWorks, and I just happened to be in the right place and the right time. And even my internship was like that. I was the only candidate they had that knew had my experience. Like that was literally why I got it. And so sometimes it's just about throwing like your resume out there. I think I did like 50 interviews so before I got one job. So keep trying. It's really hard. It can be really, this is such a hard industry to get into, but then once you're in it, it's a lot easier. And so just take whatever opportunity you can get. And it doesn't even have, you don't even need to go to like the big name studios. Like you don't need to be at Disney or DreamWorks. Like look into, you know, commercial houses. There's a lot of commercial VFX houses that you wouldn't even like, you know, that just all they do is like car commercials or something like that, right? Like anywhere you can get your foot in the door is going to be great for you and just going to give you that much of a leg up over somebody else. So if you can't, you know, get a job at one of the big places, like definitely branch out. Don't feel discouraged because it can just take a long time before you find that one place that might give you that chance. So don't give up. That's probably my advice, is just don't give up.
And also network. So use LinkedIn. If you don't have a LinkedIn, create one. And then feel free to send messages to recruiters, or I personally suggest sending messages to people who are doing what you want to do. Recruiters only know so much, and we're also receiving tons of messages, so it'll take us a little bit longer to get back to you. But really, I feel like you learn a lot when you're talking to the person doing the work you're doing. And also tell people what you're interested in. You never know where someone might end up. That is what happened to me. I just happened to tell someone I was interested in this role at DreamWorks. Turns out they knew someone, and then that's how it went. So definitely put it out there.
Yeah, all of those are really good. I think I would say keep an open mind and follow your gut. If you like it, you'd know. And if you're in the right place, you'd know. And I'm pretty sure I would be a very sad architect if I had continued that. And I would still be happily animating, but I would never explore the world that I have now. So I think keep an open mind is like, always comes up everywhere. It sounds like a cliche, but it's true. It's always rewarding to have that kind of experience when you take a leap of faith and it ends up being really good.
Excellent. And I can definitely say, you know, by being here and participating in this presentation, you know, that's also a really great thing to be doing. So I'm really glad that everyone is here tonight. So thank you very much, Catherine, Shabnam, and Eileen. It's really been fantastic to have you guys tonight. And thank you everyone who's attending. We hope that you've gotten a lot out of this webinar, and we hope that you'll join us next week for our Blender webinar. It should be pretty fun. Thank you.
Thank you all.